I didn't buy Bitcoin because of charts, influencers, or Twitter debates. I bought my first satoshis after listening to two Venezuelan refugees talk about what happens when money stops working. Now, everyone's arguing about the US and Venezuela again, power and control and politics, but what they shared with me had nothing to do with ideology. It had everything to do with survival. And once that finally clicks, Bitcoin stops being abstract and it starts getting real. There are moments when something you've heard 1,000 times before suddenly becomes real. Not because you studied harder, but because you listened differently. This was one of those times for me. Lately, Venezuela has been showing up in conversations again, in headlines and debates, and in opinions flying in every direction. I'm not here to unpack politics. I'm not here to tell anyone what to think. I want to share something quieter, a moment that changed how I understand money and why I bought my first Satoshis. I was having a casual conversation with two Venezuelan refugees after a cryptocurrency meetup that we had attended. We were just talking about life over dinner at a local pizza restaurant. I had asked them what brought them to the US. They then told me how they were planning to open a business so that people in the Latino community could send Bitcoin back to their families outside the US. They used Bitcoin to flee Venezuela and then sent Bitcoin back to family members because their country was going through hyperinflation. The price of goods was going up every few days, and there was no way for the income based in their currency to keep up. They ended their story saying that they never wanted anyone that they loved to go through this nightmare again, and they would do everything that they could to spread the word about Bitcoin. What struck me immediately was their tone. They weren't angry. They weren't emotional. They weren't trying to convince me of anything. They spoke with a calm clarity that only comes from lived experience. They described what it feels like when money slowly stops doing the one thing you expect it to do: hold value. You realize that the rules that you grew up trusting no longer apply. That's when it hit me. I had read in the news about hyperinflation for other countries, but being a citizen of the one country that holds the world's reserve currency carries a certain kind of shield, a certain security, a certain privilege that others don't have. Even when things felt stressful, the system itself still worked. Listening to them, I saw the difference between temporary discomfort and structural breakdown. For them, money wasn't an abstract topic. It wasn't about optimization, it was about options. This is why countries like Venezuela keep surfacing in global conversations, not because of one leader or policy or ideology, but because they show us something fundamental. What happens when systems that we assume are permanent aren't? When money works, we barely notice it. It's background noise. When it doesn't, it becomes central to survival and dignity and choice. What stood out to me was this: Bitcoin didn't come up for them as a rebellion, it didn't come up as a belief system. It came up as a tool to use when options of nothing better exist. Before this conversation, Bitcoin was something technical to me. It was a little abstract. After this conversation, it was very different. I understood why people turn to alternatives, not because they're extreme, but because they're practical. Bitcoin wasn't presented to me as a promise of wealth. It was presented as a way to preserve agency when traditional options narrow. That distinction mattered. At home that night, back in 2017, I bought my very first Satoshis. And for me, it was a quiet vote for freedom, for agency, and for sovereignty, not just for me, but for others too, all around the world. Here's what I want to leave with you. You don't have to agree with Bitcoin. And to be honest, Bitcoin doesn't care. But understanding why people seek alternatives, especially people who have lived through great instability, it expands your financial literacy in a deeper way. Balance isn't about extremes, it's about having options. And wisdom often arrives not through arguments, but through listening. When money works, we call it boring. But when it fails, it becomes everything. Thank you so much for holding space with me today. I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you next time.